The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. Still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, my group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
We are the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, HVERI for short. A lot of people know us from the 2018 eruption of Kīlauea in the Lower East Rift Zone. Working under Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. Since then, we've been trying to carry on and take the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned during that eruption and try and prepare for the next major disaster that comes to our island.
Yeah, so we do that through two different programs. One is volcano education, and the other part is digital resilience, which we address through online groups on social media. So the way the two programs work together is that the social media networks end up being a distribution pathway for all the information. And having that network in place means we can provide more than just volcano education, but any other preparedness information as well.
What we were working for really came about in the Mauna Loa eruption in 2022. Within hours of that eruption starting, we had the mayor, Mitch Roth, we had USGS HVO Ken Hahn on the stream trying to help flush out a little bit of the ongoing because it's so new. It's completely different from our previous major eruption, which was 2018.
One of the things that Talmadge and I were talking about was how do we deal with social media? It was something we needed to figure out and get right. Our job is to get information to the public and make sure that the public get it as well as possible and as correctly as possible. When Philip and Dane started coming to and live streaming the meetings, it was great because we were reaching more people than we normally would. So when the eruption actually happened, we had this relationship. The interviews we did during the eruption, the most fun ones were the ones with Philip and Dave because they were more relaxed and we knew we were getting to the local community and people were asking questions. So those were the best, I think. I just want to really give a shout out to those guys and how we worked as a team on this eruption. It really worked out well and we got to a lot of people we wouldn't have normally gotten.
Aloha everyone, I'm geologist Philip Ong, here with Mr. Dane DuPont from the nonprofit HVERI, the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute. Today is Thursday, April 3rd, 2025. Kīlauea has erupted another episode, number 16 of its ongoing summit eruption. So we will recap that and try to offer some insights and have some discussion and Q&A. How have you been last week, Dane?
Good, getting used to our pattern of eruptions still. Been busy, but these near 1,000-foot fountains, these, tall fountains, as I call them, just been really special to see. And I know a lot of people have been going up to the park and dealing with the parking situation to be able to catch a glimpse of the, all of this in the lava stadium, as we've called it before.
Yeah, depending on when you go, the parking is actually not that bad, but depending on when you go, the parking can be terrible as well. So yeah, definitely a lot to see up there. So we'll recap for that for you guys. We're glad to be joined by our ASO interpreters as usual, Daniel and Carrie Kaufman. Mahalo you guys as always. And we will get into our regular recap here, Dan. Unless you got anything else to add?
Nope. If anybody's got any questions, drop them in the chat and we'll try and get to them in the episode.
All right, sounds good. So let's get things turned around here. And one more thing. All right. Aloha, everyone. This is our Hawaiian Volcano Summary for April 3rd, 2025. Another week passed with another burst of lava from Kīlauea Summit. This was episode 16 of the current eruption, which had begun 100 days prior to this episode on December 23rd, 2024. This began with a low level eruption from the north vent. I'm just going to pause there, guys. Looks like we got something wrong with our visual here, huh? We lost our interpreters. Apologies for that. Maybe I should just start over, huh? Since we use this for.
Yeah, let's just rerun that.
All right. Well, hi, everyone. This is our Hawaiian Volcano Summary for April 3rd, 2025. Kīlauea has erupted another one of its episodes, number 16, at its summit this past week. And that one occurred 100 days after the eruption began back in December 23rd, 2024. This began with a north vent showing low-level activity, fountaining and spattering that occurred for about 12 hours prior to the onset of higher fountaining from the south vent, which is visible here. It put out quite a lot of tephra, Pele's hair, and fog here. You see it blowing onto the crater rim. And this actually was blown and deposited all the way onto the Highway 11 that the county runs west of the summit here. So there's a visual of what that fountain looked like. The lava fountains peaked at around 800 feet or 245 meters, according to the USGS HVO, which is slightly lower than the previous episode, but still higher than all of the ones before that. So we'll show you here on the screen. Besides this video from the USGS, we have a time lapse from the S2 camera showing that low-level activity from the north vent and the higher fountains from the south vent, which then decrease before the eruption pauses, and the cones around the vents continue to flow with that hot fluid material for several hours after the fountaining stops. Here's a view from the B1 camera, which is further back, so closer to a view that you might have as a visitor to the national park. Here's that low-level activity and the fountains in the background, the flows that were fed into the crater during that eruption, that phase of the eruption. And also noticeable is here in the foreground, the ooze-up flows that occur after the flows come across the crater floor that continued through this morning. So here they are in the foreground once again, showing that magma is actually injecting below the crust of this hardened lava lake, as well as erupting over the top through its fountains. This is all happening in the same area of the recent episodes in the national park, with events in the southwest, feeding those flows into the center of the crater, and the ooze-up flows on the eastern margin close to the downdrop block. All this within a closed area in a national park and posing no threat to people, with the largest threat still being the tephra, Pele's hairs, and gas emissions. Since the episode ended, we've begun to see the recharge patterns, the tilt meters, and as well as tremor. This is the same pattern as we've seen previous to most of the other episodes, up through episode 14. Episode 15 had earthquakes that occurred slightly afterwards that we have not seen this episode. Here's our most recent earthquakes for the week, showing low-level activity in the south flank and some small events around the summit and Pahala, but not in the same numbers or concentrations as we saw the previous week. So altogether, the USGS has noted the eruption to last in total of 37 hours from start to finish, low-level activity and fountains. The fountains slightly over 25 hours. And because we had a larger drop in deflation over the previous week with this episode, the current prognosis is that the most likely start of the next episode is 7 to 10 days from now, or next week, Thursday through Sunday. Of course, this is adjusted daily, so when more data is available, that will be refined as well. Here is the Highway 11, southwest of the summit, and here you see the accumulation of tephra and Pele's hairs that's on the margins of the roadway here. So there's certainly a little more impact than usual there. Quite a lot of VOG was released. Here is the first day with low-level activity blowing through the saddle to the northwest part of the island. And then the following day, a larger emission with a fountaining phase that spreads further beyond Hawaii Island to the neighboring islands as well. So if we look at the VMAP VOG forecast, here is our emission source at Kīlauea. With the current weather patterns, that gas that currently is very concentrated blows across the other islands and then clears out in the next day or so as the trade winds appear to return. Currently, if we look at our citizen science monitoring network through Purple Air, we see here there are some very high concentrations of poor air quality, especially in this northwest part of Hawaii Island, but also extending to Maui as well. That's our summary for Kīlauea. To round it up, at the start of each month, USGS puts out a new Mauna Loa update as well. So we'll recap Mauna Loa as usual. Earthquakes are still quite low. There's 18 in the summit area over the past week, but all of small magnitude here. And in line with that, the USGS update this month notes that seismicity has been low, with approximately 86 small magnitude earthquakes, mostly below magnitude 1.5, which is expected for the post-eruption phase of this volcano, and slightly higher than the previous month. Over the past 5 years, we can see that we're still at very low earthquakes per month compared to the pre-eruption time in 2022. So the volcano is still filling with magma. We still see the vertical signal rising here at the summit, but it's doing that without having to stress all the rocks around it. So nothing imminent on Mauna Loa. And that's our Hawaiian volcano summary for this week. Okay, so let's transition to our hazard summary and show you guys some of the cameras that are up. So this is the KP camera that's on the south flank of Mauna Loa, looking back towards Kīlauea. Kīlauea is right there. This was an image from earlier this morning with the VOG blowing kind of that way over there. The haze is where it's going. Let me pull this back to a couple of days ago, where we have the beginning of our low-level eruption, and the glow and VOG comes up. You see it's kind of vertical and blowing in this area, turns to the east. This is west. So west to east, or sometimes a little more north to south, kind of coming at us at the screen and blowing towards the infrastructure that's north of the caldera there. Show you a different view just because we showed you this one last week from the national park at the volcano house. Last week, this camera got completely obscured by the VOG blowing right at it. So this time the wind was a little bit different. You see there was eruption, there is VOG blowing, but this camera stays visible the entire time. There is still VOG blowing across the screen and then beyond it in that direction as well there. And one more, this is a K2 camera. So this is at the tower at Uekahuna, which is being renovated following 2018 collapse. So here you see the high fountain peeking over the rim from that area. And more so you see where that cloud is coming is more towards this camera in this particular case. Let's let it loop around there. We can maybe see that a little more easily. And coming more to the camera there and then a little bit more to the right, but that highway we showed you is right around in there. So it makes sense that this stuff getting carried off in that direction would collect down there. So we showed you this image, I think. Yeah. And I'm not sure what just happened to the other one, but we'll get it back a little later. So yeah, there's our tephra and Pele's hairs, margins of the road down on a highway between those mile markers in the 30s. I want to say 35 to 38, something like that, down there on highway. That was impact during that high fountain phase on Tuesday. So as we've shared, the VMAP project is this, a VOG measurement and prediction project from University of Hawaii at Manoa. They're taking the emissions and modeling it with the weather, and that's how we get these nice VOG forecasts. Showed you this one, which is more of the pure SO2 concentrations. Now, one thing that happens is as this gas moves through the atmosphere, interacts with the moisture in the atmosphere, the sunlight, and creates particles that are sulfates. That's this SO4 button right here. If we push that, then we have a better idea of the VOG that's visible out across the islands here. And you can see quite a lot, even over Oahu and Kauai, impacting in the next 24 hours by the looks of it here. So we can look at the State of Hawaii Department of Health air quality. Let's get this to reset there. It is showing us some yellows here from Ocean View to Waikoloa, as well as in Kihei, but not a whole lot of data beyond that, which is why we like to turn to our Purple Air Citizen Science Monitoring Network. There's Hawaii Island. You can see there's actually near volcano, some areas as well. And you see this Kulani prison site here. We did believe that the path might actually be something like this, right? So, which is not typical. Normally we have our trade winds blowing this down and then wrapping it around. But when we have this southern or southeast wind, or so Kona wind's usually from the west, but the south wind that comes from here can bring this up over this flank of Mauna Loa, which is over here. This is Mauna Kea. Once it gets there, it's got to go through the saddle and gets funneled over there to the Kona side. And then possibly beyond. So keep scrolling over here to Maui. Let's let this populate. And there's some yellows and oranges there too. Oahu is always hard to believe because there's so much population there with other sources. But Kauai looks in the clear, at least so far here. What's our current air quality impact there, and our hazard summary, which was the gas as well as that deposit on a highway and nearby areas. Should be said that a lot of people in the golf course subdivision in Volcano Village are having more regular impacts of this stuff, and it's just become a thing to deal with, and so unless there's something abnormal about that, we'll just keep mentioning it like that in passing. But it is happening, and it is one of the bigger impacts of the people that live nearby. It's having that stuff collecting your gutters, and at what point do you decide it's over enough to go on and do a cleaning run, right? Or you're doing it every single week here with every episode. Tricky either way. All right, so we can also look at the air quality alert from the national park. Here's the current conditions. Northeast winds at 6 miles an hour, 3 meters per second, which is pooling the gas in this area potentially. Right now, everything looks in the green. We come to the charts and everything is mostly been in the green. We do see at the campground, north of the summit there, SO2 and PM 2.5 spiking here earlier at 2 p.m., about 2 p.m. Slightly before there, 1 p.m. as well. Also at Kahuku, a little bit of SO2. But that's, oh no, and over at look at this on the Kona side, Kaloko Honokohau, we're starting to get some particulate matter coming in as well there. So this is interesting to see this added on and visible here as well. Kanakakoi is on here too, so great to see this data set growing on the website. We can look at the Mounts project, which is what we often look at for our INSAR, our satellite deformation, but We don't have any of that. We just do have these satellite SO2 captures. So there's the one from the most recent capture interval day, and then the one before that, right? Look, showing that saddle path, as I mentioned during our summary there, and expanding beyond. And we can go back the previous days of this week. Nothing there, nothing there. What was it, a little bit in the background, a little bit still remnant. That comes from our last episode ending there on the 27th. So there's our previous burst. And that's been about the story with the gas output here. So on a global scale, here's windy.com and our island chain right there. Our emission source, you see it's getting caught in this gyre here towards Alaska, but then getting pulled back towards California area in this Eastern Pacific region right through here. So week after week, you see this stuff's collecting and it's gathering here over the ocean, which is pretty interesting to note as well. And so that's our hazard summary, which is mostly airborne at this point in time. But always lurking there are the earthquakes. My old advisor used to joke that the earthquakes are the hazard that's going to get everyone, but they're the least sexy ones. So they get the least amount of love and attention usually, but they are always happening, sometimes smaller, and that's how we hope they stay. So here is the last week of time earthquakes. These are colored by depth. Put the scale on here. So the purples and blues and greens are deep, yellows and oranges intermediate, and the reds are shallower. So you see these background events on Mauna Kea, deep Pahala earthquakes and blues and purples there. And otherwise, let's zoom in. And let's zoom it in this other way as well. Maybe a little too much there, right? Okay. So we do still have some events happening on this southeast flank of Mauna Loa, which is not surprising. We've often seen interactions, adjustments between those two mountains as the pressure changes. Kīlauea is pressurizing, then releasing, then pressurizing, then releasing, and maybe it's having some effect here in the flank of Mauna Loa, but otherwise it's nothing major, just a few little adjustments. More adjustments over here in the southwest flank of Mauna Loa, 3.3 at 5 miles. So one once in a while is just normal flank movement, and that's what it does as it swells and grows and fills from inside. Kīlauea, there's our summit events, mostly closer to the previous episode, and a few south flank events, but it's not really as many as we're used to seeing, to be honest there. So it looks like pretty slow in an earthquake data set this past week here. That's plotted by depth. We like to also look at plotted by magnitude. So here is the last week. Our 3.3 was the largest. We also had a 3.0 deep under the south flank. It's not even under the island, we should say, but under the south margin of the island here, 26 miles down. Likely one of these settling events in the deep crust and mantle underneath the island here. So everything else is within a regular pattern, mostly Pahala earthquakes are the rest of those right there. So those are our earthquakes. We'll move on to our monitoring signals. And we'll start by just recapping our sequence with the USGS notices here. Going back to Monday's daily update. Following the previous update, we were noting that the vents looked like they were blocked. There was no glow that first night. The tremor was looking different and was much reduced as well. We had a flurry of earthquakes beneath the summit in a few hours immediately following the onset of the pause. And with all that, it seemed like something different might be happening. And we see this text in the Monday update before this most recent episode that notes, if the vent is partially blocked, additional pressure may be needed to clear out the conduit, resulting in a delay of the next episode. But when all was said and done, we saw none of that. We actually saw glow coming in, then spattering, beginning around 5:20 p.m. on Monday there. 6 o'clock, it became continuous. It increased to low fountaining, all within that vent. By 11 p.m., let's see here, is this on here? Yeah, by about 11 p.m. is when lava began overflowing from the north vent. And that's the official start of the episode, when lava exits the vent there. So we had that activity from, here's a Monday update, status report in the evening to Tuesday morning, when we have the daily update issued that notes low-level activity is still ongoing at the north vent. This was 9:45 a.m. about. And not long afterwards, 11:22 a.m., they note the 10:24 onset of high fountaining phase of that episode 16. That was 12 hours after the start of the episode. The south vent was the one doing the high fountaining, whereas the north vent stayed with this low level activity while it was active, then it actually shut off first. So they note that in that first, 10 minutes, the fountains had already grown to 700 feet, 215 meters there. So let's move on to so this was a Tuesday status report, a fall daily update. Then our next update is Wednesday morning, the daily update there. And there they note that the eruption continued with fountains, but the fountains diminished significantly this morning, Wednesday morning, that is to say, to less than 300 feet or 90 meters high. They note that might suggest the episode to end soon, and it was not long afterwards, where about an hour and a half later, I notice on Wednesday, right around noon, that the eruption ended at 12:03 p.m. when fountain at the south vent stopped. So overall, the episode lasts over 37 hours, with the last 25 hours and 39 minutes consisting of fountains from the south vent. They note coverage of over 50% of the floor of Halema'uma'u. Right? They note the deposition of Pele's hair and tephra, mile marker 35 to 37 on the highway there. And it notes that we lost just over 14 microradians of deflation there, right? Which is one of our larger amounts. And we'll see that again. We'll look at the tilt graph. We'll point that out as well here. And otherwise, since then, the eruption was coincident with the change in tilt back to inflation and the tremor continuing at decreased intensity as well. So that's the chain of USGS notices, but the one today, as we noted up top, actually puts out the expectation for the next window of time, 7 to 10 days from now, for it to return. And I think that is enough to note here. So I should note also they did measure the gases during the pauses, 1,000 tons per day. During the high fountain phase, about 50,000 tons per day was the measurement. And we'll see that there in the other data as well. So the timeline now looks like this. We're up to episode 16. There's the official start and end times, lava exiting the vent, and the fountaining phase stopped. Looks like the time's missing still. Should say noon, 37 hours, and we're waiting for how long the pause is going to be. So over the last 5 episodes, our average has been 6 days. If you go back to the last 10 episodes, our average has been about 5 days. So somewhere in that range, 5 to 6 days, you'd say to be our current average or normal. So when they say 7 to 10, that is a little bit more, a little bit further than that, right? So here's our tilt plot. There's our large drop. This is UWD. There's our sandhill, 14 microradian drop right there. You can see it compares about twice as much as the previous one. The previous 2, in fact, were smaller drops. It takes the third one back, 16, 15, 14, 13 over here to have a comparable drop in time. And you can see how the recovery time can be extended a little bit as well, right? In this case, it was from, looks like the 11th to the 20th, about 9 days or so right there. So that's about the current expectation from USGS. So we still have a data gap here. Our laser rangefinder and our KW camera and thermal camera are still offline due to being hit by lava to their power source during episode 15 here. So what we expect is a similar pattern. Crater foreplay got thicker by some amount, and so when this data comes back online, hopefully it'll just reconnect somewhere up here, and we'll get more data points, and we'll have a little gap, but we can continue the trend and the plot here as well. Earthquake counts per day in that Kīlauea area. Our last episode was right in here where it ends on the 26th. So this is that earthquake cluster that follows it, as well as that Pahala cluster that also occurs just before it too, right there. So here we are today, and no similar elevated earthquake counts. So showing how this is different from the last time. Not that it seemed to matter, right? Even though we didn't have the glow and the same kind of tremor, we ended up with that same sequence for the episode onset. Looking now over the last year, earthquakes per week, you can see we're still fairly low. That's normal since our December onset of eruption there. So there's really an open system. The vent is basically open. It crusts over and it slumps down on itself there, but that pipeline seems like it's open. And when that happens, then you don't need to pressurize and cause earthquakes around your magma chamber. You can just vent more gas and build more pressure and then have a fountain and relieve the pressure that way, for example. So that's all expected to see this here as well. And looking at the GPS for the last year, this is the phase that we're in right here on the right side. This most recent following our tilt, where we have this extension north and south, and it contracts as the fountain releases pressure, stretches out, contracts, and it's basically mirroring that tilt pattern there. And so what's cool when we see a plot like this is we can see the longer term pattern. So you can see there was quite a bit of a drop in that first few episodes. I want to say episode 1, 2, and 3 are all of this right here. Episode 4 was perhaps, maybe this is 3 as well. No, yeah, this is the recovery from 3. So here's 4 coming in right here. So really, since the beginning of 4, we've been at a fairly stable level, right? We haven't been in a net rising or falling. It's hard to just draw a straight line, but you know, you can draw, let's call it an envelope here through this thing. It's pretty tight right there, right? It's not going up or down by any of my estimation here, which means that all the magma coming in, all the pressure building is all able to release. That's the beauty of this moment in time here, where we have this equilibrium where this is actually happening. And it's quite possible that every batch of magma that's making it into the shallow area is then just building pressure and erupting. So we might be actually seeing some expression of the actual input rate of magma into Kīlauea Summit right now. And so all of it's getting out, and so we don't have to keep on net swelling it like we were having to do for the first part of the year here, like with these interruptions of intrusions and eruptions across the volcano. So that's the summit, and similar analysis on the Middle East Rift at Pu'o'o. We can see contraction happening, meaning that there is not magma activity happening in there, and it's just cooling and settling, following the most recent activity, which was the injection of magma during the Nepal eruption, the build up to the Nepal eruption in the middle of last year. So those are our data here. We'll scroll through some of these 5-year plots, but that is the story. So we have a few new thermal images. Let's see if I can make this slightly smaller. Yeah, maybe like that. Right, so going back in time, March 27th, there's a view of, at this point, the end of the episode 15. The vents are inactive, but we still have a pond of lava here in the center that's overturning. And we have a large ooze-up flow over here in this southeastern part of the caldera that we noted last time as well. Similar to what we saw this most recent episode, although it wasn't all quite in the foreground, we saw this episode, it might have been more something like this. I would put it something like that, right? But pretty similar as far as the area and size and location, just slightly offset where it leaked out. So different reviews, we're going to go back now to the 21st, the previous event as well. So there we see small ooze out in that similar area, inactive vents, but still overturning pooled lava here in this area just downslope of the vents. One more, going back to March 14th, the week before. So there you see there have been lots of smaller ooze-outs in that area still, and inactive vents, inactive lava a few days after that previous pulse. And you see that where it was still hot was actually here in the north, where that big channel had snaked around. So cool to see that. And this is where the USGS is doing their scans as well. They're flying and doing thermal imagery and scanning for elevation so they can make new maps. And so we're really looking forward to all the data that comes out of that, which is likely to be a lot, but it doesn't process all super quickly. So before we get to our halfway break, I thought it'd be fun for us to do a few stats here. So to start, maximum fountain height by episode, I've put this here in meters. So 100 meters is about 330 feet or so, right? So you're looking at 330, 660. This is about 1,000. 305 would be 1,000. So there's our 1,000-foot fountain. 800 foot, the most recent time. You can see how it's larger than all the ones prior to it over here. This set is all the 600 footers grouping from episode 11 onwards. Down here we have some 300 footers and some 200 footers from earlier on in the sequence. But what you can see is, since episode 5 especially, and I like to group the first 4 episodes as kind of the onset and opening development of this, and episode 5 and on seems to be a cleaner pattern. So for episode 5 and on, you can see this stepwise increase here in the fountains. So that's really interesting to note, right? And that might well be because of the supply rate having a good pathway up and very efficiently getting there. But we'll learn more of that, hopefully, when we have results from the USGS, especially in the chemistry of the lavas coming out when more of that data is released. So that's the fountain heights. We'll show you some other statistics as well. So I've got 2 plots left and right here. So the first thing to note is the bottom one is zoomed out and the top one is zoomed in. These are the same graphs on the left and the same graphs on the right. On the left, I'm looking at just the episodes of where lava is coming out, and on the right, I'm looking at the pauses as well. Right? So it looks like a lot of stuff on the screen, but let's start off just up here in the top left. Episode numbers are on the bottom, and total duration in hours. Right? So there's 1 day, 2 days, and these are actually off the graph, episodes 3 and 4. Because if you look down here, episode 4 is at 72 hours, 3 days. And episode 3 is way longer than that, right? Approaching about a week there. Now, what do the colors mean here? This is something that's interesting to note in how the USGS is timing the start of each episode. So I thought it'd be useful to, for example, pull up one of these updates that we've had. And let's see here. When I note several benchmarks, right? 1, weak spattering. 2, they note continuous activity. 3, they note lava spilling out of the vent. 4, they note the onset of high fountaining. And 5, they note the end of high fountaining, right? So from all that is what these colors are representing. Oh, that's the wrong one there. So let me zoom it in here. Red here is the high fountaining phase. Orange is lava flows during an episode. So lava is coming out of the vent, but it's not fountain yet. And yellow is they haven't called the episode begun yet, but we're seeing spattering, we're seeing lava, which in my old school mind, I was taught if you see lava, it's erupting. Simple as that, right? So but to try to organize things here, I've put those in yellow. So the USGS episode duration is going to be the orange and the red only, not the yellow, but I think the yellow is instructive for us to look at as well. So there's our first 4 episodes doing their own thing. And really since 5, you can see the pattern starting to change. We're starting to get more pre-lava flow activity to the eruption onset, at least a little bit here, right? That was the first group of them. And then we go to having hardly any ramp up. We just have glow and suddenly it's erupting and spilling out of the crater and fountaining all at the same time. And then more recently, you can see we've had longer orange phases. This is the lava oozing out with its gas pistoning, leaking from the vent, that kind of thing. And so if you look at the episode duration in total, if you look at 14, red and orange, 15, red and orange, and 16, they're about the same actually, right? When you combine them, as far as how long was lava leaving the vent area. You can add some of this other activity as well, and it doesn't change it too much here either, right? What is different is the size of the red bar in episode 16. You can see it is one of the longer high fountaining phases of this sequence, especially since episode 5, right? So that is a little bit different, and that's likely why we dropped so much in our tilt, was we did a lot more work by high fountaining for a lot longer. So that's how that looks there. And just to show you this zoomed out version there with those two tall plots, that episode 3 really skews the axis here, right? The way I think of this is, we saw episode 1 was the original fissures. There wasn't any cone or fountain yet. We're building the lower fountains to that. Episode 2 was when we saw the drain back reverse from 1 and start oozing back out before it starts fountain again. And episode 3 was that more typical, like the low-level continuous eruption we've seen from previous summit eruptions here in Kīlauea. And then 4 you see is something's changing right there before we start having this new pattern with 5. Right? So likely it was some buildup of pressure to erupt like we had before, but then now we have some pathway that's allowing this recharge of this gas-rich magma to an open conduit remaining, that we have this episodic fountaining happening, which is really fascinating there. So to look at the pauses here, same thing. The bottom is zoomed out, so you can see that episode 3 also has the longest pause that follows it. So red and orange is the episode, put the pause on the bottom right there. So there's a longer amount of time not erupting than it was erupting. And you see that those were proportional for these first 4 episodes. The more you have lava going out, the longer pause you get following it as well. But you can see that since about episode 7, we're actually pretty steady, right? This is 3 days, 6 days, 9 days. So right around 7 days is right around in here. So right around a week, a little under a week is our average there of combining 6 days of pause with our 1 day of activity right there. And so that's the pattern we're used to seeing here from episode 7 and on, right? There's been no pause. The pause is ongoing here for 16. So we can't really tally that one here quite yet. So those are the data for our current statistics. And so I wanted to just recap once again that this is the Pu'o'o eruption data. Pu'o'o also had a pattern of fountains beginning lower and then growing in height. They do have some variability in which episodes produce the highest fountains. Then towards the end, they started to decline gradually as well, right? But know that there were some low events even in the middle of there as well. Yeah, and maybe we'll have a chance to talk more about some of this here shortly. I think what we'll do now is very quickly touch on our volcano watch before we take a short break here. And the volcano watch this week, Kīlauea is continuing summit eruption. And what they've done is put up the summit tilt plots for eruptions in 2025. This is us right here. So episodes 1 to 16, all through here. And you can see that overall, we had that decrease episodes 1 through 4 also coming down. But since episode 4 to 5, you can see we're mostly at this equilibrium level right there, and slight wigglings up and down, but within some error, but overall fairly steady. They're comparing this is the Pu'o'o tilt from 84 to 86. And so you can see it had a similar pattern of recharging, and during the fountains, it would have sharp deflation, recharge, deflation, similar to what we have going on here. And you can note that overall, they had a pattern that was some variation, but overall deflationary going down there. Go back to another era of time of episodic eruptions, Mauna'ulu from 69 to 1970. And there you can see similar, not quite as, what's the word here? Full data set, right? You can see these all were measured by hand here. But you see the similar pattern of inflation, deflation during the episodes, and reinflation, deflation. It's just a little bit rougher here in the view, right? And what you can see overall is overall inflationary pattern on that one. It's interesting to see how you have these different variations of it there. Right? And not plotted here is a Kīlauea Iki activity. So this volcano watch is interesting to me. They're obviously making those comparisons up there. What they can show, let's jump here to the key statements that they say here. This indicates that Kīlauea summit has been in some level of equilibrium since eruption began, or I would argue since episode 4 or so, right? The north and south vents are able to incrementally release the pressure that accumulates within the summit magma chambers with each episode there. As long as that equilibrium is maintained, the episodic eruption at the summit of Kīlauea is likely to continue. It's also allowed them to publish windows of probability for when episodes could begin. And I do still note that changes such as decrease in the inflation rate or severe blockage of the vents could alter the current pattern of episodes, including bringing them to an end. So that's the most forward-looking statements we've had here. And that's Volcano Watch for this week. And perhaps before I take the pause here, I would just show you some of that data as well. Here is Kīlauea Iki, high fountain episodes 1 through 17, right? So what's interesting to note here is sometimes they kind of grow to a high level. And that's in episode 1 here. There's 1,000 feet, about 300 meters. Curious facilities are high fountains. Some of these shoot up and down. Some of them say very brief spikes, which is a little bit different than what we've seen. Now, to make a distinction, Kapoho eruption also had high fountains of lava. I've taken the USGS Professional Paper 537E and looked through for what they report as heights and plotted them here. The difference is not episodic. We have a fissure that opens up, starts shooting up. It keeps erupting lava the entire time until it shuts all the way off. So just to point this out in case you're wondering, well, are there other high fountains? Yes, there are. But what we're narrowing our data set to is the ones that are episodic in particular, just to make that point in case anyone has that question coming up. So Mana'ulu I don't have plotted quite as nicely, but what we have here is this plot of maximum fountain height in meters over here. And here they have eruption rate on the bottom. So we can ignore this bottom part, but you see each one is episodes. So each episode is numbered here. So episodes 1, 2, and 3, about 100 meters. 4 is up to 200. 5 is up to over 1,000 feet here, right? 6 drops back down. 7 goes back up to about 1,000. 8's higher. 9 even higher. 10 goes back down to very low level activity, barely shooting up at all. 11, 12, you see there's quite a lot of variation there, but generally a pattern of they get taller with time there as well. And then the last thing I'll point out here is that here's also Mana'ulu. So Mana'ulu, in this caption here, they note the full height bars are the eruptive episodes, and the half height bars are what they call repose period eruptive activity. That's the low level activity that are not fountains, right? So there you have fountains, not fountains but erupting, then fountains. You see this pattern actually is replicated other places as well, right? You have this longer period of onset of low level and then a fountain coming later. And over time at Mana'ulu especially, you see from here we have hardly any of that happening. And then those ramp up periods get longer and longer and longer until eventually it transitions from that, right? This is actually Pu'o'o episodes 1 through 20. And Mana'ulu is actually up here, right? Short fountains, and then there is that lead up time increasing as well. Till the last one here, there were only 12 at Mana'ulu. So yeah, that's most of them there. There is one paper we're not going to talk in detail as much today, but we'll cover this more in the future. But this is Scientific Investigations Report 2018-5109, right? This is the Pu'u'u eruption episodes 21 through early 48 that was put out here and put out 2018. And I'll just scroll through a little bit to show you, this is something we'll go in more detail in the future, but this one recaps the previous events as well. And some things to note. This is how much lava came out, and this is time. So you can see overall at Pu'u'u, all those different eruptions, all the other variations, there's about roughly the same amount of lava came out every single time right there. And you can see that over time, this is the other one, over time, the average discharge rate. So over time, more and more lava was coming out at a time as well as the fountains were essentially more efficiently relieving the pressure and getting more lava out. But then we're lasting less time to end up at the same volume there, right? And so let me just keep going here. There's some different views. Average interduration episodes, we're looking at between 23 and 26 days. Average duration of fountaining for them, 46 hours for the first 16 episodes and 13 hours for the last 25 or so. So in total, it was about 25 hours average. I'll skip over some of this other stuff down in here. But you see fountains sometimes leaning over to the right. Sometimes they're more straight up. Sometimes they're fan-shaped with obstructions at the vent in there. There's all kinds of funky stuff they describe. There is our bar graph with the maximum fountain heights. And here's what I wanted to really get to. This is each episode 21 through time here with time on the bottom, and just showing how fountains are not the same height, the high fountain the entire time, but they often will peak high and then come down. Peak high and then come down, or they start low, they ramp up, they peak, and then come down. You see in every different episode, it's a slightly different pattern here. This is something you could also do with our current eruption and our current episodes, is you could go through and map them over time. How tall is a fountain? Does it start off low and then shoot up? Does it start off high and then shoot down? And you can see that there's very interesting variation with that all across there as well. Right? So there's a lot more for us to dig into in here as well. Their pauses between episodes had about an average with some larger deviations in it as well. And the duration of their episodes decreased over time and then eventually stabilized as well, kind of similar to what we're seeing here. But so if you're wondering, are we on a pace to have 47 episodes that last 3 years here at Kīlauea Summit? It's not so easy to compare it because we have a much different interval of time, much different rate, but we can look at the bigger picture patterns and wonder, okay, like have we stabilized our rate? And this is where the equilibrium is really interesting. So as long as our equilibrium is maintained, there's no reason to think anything will change. But once we start seeing things move more deflation, then we'll say maybe that's a sign that we're ramping down. We don't see it yet, but that's how it worked in the past. And we'll leave that paper at that. All right, you guys, I will pass it to you guys for our break here.
All right. Thank you, Phil. I'll go ahead and get Lou up in here. All right. Welcome in, Lou. And
Hey.
have your community corner lined up. How you been?
Yeah, I think I'm doing good. How are you doing?
All right.
Actually, I should say I'm doing great because I have some fantastic news from the park today. And first of all, I want to say happy birthday, Carrie. I will try to take it easy tonight on you. Here we go. Let's get into this. All right. Take a look here in the bottom right, and that is not open yet. That is the old Jagger Museum, and those are the new area that they're building. So it looks like some seating area out there that's not open yet. And I don't know if this area would be open if the fountaining was going on like that, but that would be an amazing seating area. And you would think that was going to be my great news, but it's actually coming up in a little bit. I want to point out, never enter a closed or restricted area. They did close Waikahuna and Kīlauea Overlook during episode 15. We had Tephra flying through episode 16 out to the highway. There's a reason they close those areas, so please pay attention while you're up there. This is an interesting situation here I'm following, this small void that Yvonne picked up on way back when. And apparently somebody had filled it in. Did you hear about this, Dane?
Yeah. Somebody filled it in.
Is it filled in? Filled in? Like
well,
it's
I mean,
closed off? It's steam, right? It's going to blow it out?
Eventually, probably.
Right.
I mean, all it takes is enough little jiggles of earthquakes, and eventually it's going to work its way through, combined with the steam and everything. We'll see how long it is.
I would think so. We'll have to take a look at that next time we get up there. So beware, that's at the steaming vent area at Wahine Kapu. Just a safe tips for driving if you're not from around here. It's busy in the park. Drive slow. Be patient while you're up there. And prepare for weather changes because the wind changes. So that means the fog changes direction. Rain, cold.
And things like an N95 mask would also be good to throw in, and potentially some glasses of some kind, or even some goggles, just stuff like that in case the winds shift and you get the Pele's hair. Yeah,
we've talked about this a little bit, you and I, over the last couple of years with eruptions and about being prepared. But this time, this series of episodes, I think it's all the information that you and I have been sharing, and just what you said right there is extremely important. And you mentioned to me when I was up there, changing your shirt before you get in your vehicle is huge, so you don't get the Pele's hair all in your vehicle. I thought that was pretty important. Water is another one up there. The visitors to Hawaii Volcanoes National Park need to plan ahead and bring plenty of their own drinking water for now. There's not the filling station that was at the visitor center. That place is under construction. There is water for sale up there at Volcano House, in the MWR, in the Kīlauea military camp. But I would prepare with your own water while you're up there. And construction, it's everywhere. I have this little map here. I keep getting a lot of emails and questions on where is the best viewing area. The little eyeballs kind of signify where the best viewing area is. It all depends on where you're at, honestly, because every viewing area has something good to offer and every view is fantastic. So spread all the way around. I did highlight the area that's closed off to visitors. Again, I can't stress that enough. There's a shot of our remodeling of the Kīlauea Visitor Center. 2 years-ish. Okay. And here is our new Kīlauea Welcome Center. That's up at KMC. So you drive past the construction, past the steaming vents, and it'll be off on your right-hand side. It's a great spot to park, ask some questions, and you can walk. It's a short 5-minute walk out to the caldera from there. You can hook a right and go up a little bit and see from the Kīlauea overlook. You can make a left and go down towards the steaming vents. There's views in each direction. A little shot from Yvonne from the construction going on, and blind turns. If you are driving to Devastation Trail to go to Keanakekoi overlook, this is the route you're going to take, and there's going to be a lot of blind turns in there. So stay in your lane. Parking. Phil mentioned at the beginning tonight, he said, it depends on when you go. We're going through so many episodes now that traffic has calmed down quite a bit. The mad rush is over up there during certain times. So there is parking available. Just pick your time.
But I'll add that when times are bad, though, they're getting exceptionally bad.
Just like I'm showing here. Yep.
To the point where traffic on Highway 11 is being backed up all the way to Volcano Village and stuff like that's happening. So it's hit or miss up there. Try and miss the traffic.
We caught a report at the end of episode 16 that traffic was backed up from the entrance to the park pretty much all the way down to Mountain View, Curtistown. So it's going to be slow leaving the park in the afternoons. We do have an event that they've been very thin on events happening in the park, but this is the Kahuku unit. It's a coffee talk from Three Mountain Alliance. It's a watershed partnership formed to Halema'uma'u over 1 million acres across Mauna Loa, Kīlauea, and Hualalai. Volcanoes are precious native ecosystem resources. So this is Saturday, April 5th, 9:30 to 11. It's an hour and a half down at the Kahuku Visitor Center. Worth going. It's a beautiful spot down there. Plan for a few hours. And Life on the Edge is still happening. You can check that out in the park. I would check into the Kīlauea Welcome Center at KMC and get more information. And here's the big news. We are flush with excitement to announce that the rehabilitation of the Nahuku Lava Tube Comfort Station is complete. Yes, you guys hear me gripe that there's a shortage of flushable toilets in the park. There are porta potties everywhere, but this one has been finished and is open for business. I did list some of the other places that you can find the vault toilets, but this one here is in between Devastation Trail and the Kīlauea Visitor Center.
Yeah. Hopefully it stays open for more than a couple years.
Hopefully. Quick shot of the inside. It's a wonderful flushable toilets. Pacific Tsunami Museum. It is Tsunami Awareness Month this month. The Pacific Tsunami Museum is proud to honor Tsunami Awareness Month with education, activity, expert talks, and update exhibits. If you are listening right now and you are downtown, they actually have an event going on in their facility. If you can't catch it tonight, they are open weekends, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. to learn about the tsunamis. And there's a shot from inside I thought I would share. It's inside the old bank, and that's an actual vault in the bank. It's pretty amazing in there. And if you're not subscribed to our newsletter, it did go out today. Let's check your inbox. It's not too late to check it out. You can go to hveri.org and you can find it there. And yeah, there's our newsletter for the month. There we go, Dane.
All right. Well, yeah, it gets us to some thank yous. We did have one donation come through from Dawn. Wanted to just reach out, thank him for that $5. Says, aloha all, happy Pizza Friday tomorrow. Appreciate that. We also want to thank the Kīlauea Recovery, the Puna Strong program, as well as the Bye Bye grants through the County Council, Kīlauea Recovery Team, Hawaii Community Foundation, the whole gang, and what they've done to help support this program, as well as our digital resilience and youth development programs that we do at HVERI. So yeah, we'd just like to, shout out everybody that supports us here. The likes, subscriptions, the shares, all that stuff does go and help get this seen by more people, trying to get some real information out there as opposed to the hype and a bunch of AI generated thumbnails and stuff like that. And some of our partners there. All right.
There we go.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lou. We will go ahead and tag Phil back in for the back half of this and see where we're at. All right. Welcome back.
Mahalo. Yeah, great to see that. All those updates there. So, all right. I'll put up our observations on screen here. And here we go. I thought I would just mention something I forgot there in our monitoring segment. In our update today, there is one thing that's a little different that happened after the end of the episode. So they note, a thick white plume of gas has been present at the vents since fountaining ended. Glow was also visible overnight, similar to earlier pauses. But here's a new thing. Small spatter events in the south vent were observed late after the afternoon after fountaining ended. Similar events have not previously been reported after fountaining episodes, but suggests magma remains high in the conduit. This morning, bright sulfur deposits are visible on the vent cones. And additionally, there are still lava flows oozing out. So a couple of things to note there, a little bit different. Some extra spatter after the fountaining was over. More gas, or maybe the gas is more sulfur rich something because it's deposit or the conditions are just right to make deposition easier. All that said, here are some current views. This is a V1 camera looking at the summit. There's a little bit of, looks like a little bit of extra sulfur deposits there, and then there's some down here visible. Not the best angle. Maybe I can find where they had it more zoomed in. Or maybe I can't. Maybe it's not on here. All right, go to the next one, V2. There it is, more zoomed in. So there you can see these patches of yellow, bright yellow sulfur there, and there especially, and all this degassing coming out. It looks like there's stuff maybe slumped back into the opening. So there is gas leaking out. You see it's around the edges, and then through one crack in the middle, which is pretty interesting to note there too. Well, those are current views. Here's our summit webcams. So similar views there of the V1 and V2 cameras. Our S2 camera seems to have gone offline overnight, 1:36 in the morning, but it did catch most of the episode there. Unfortunately, we do have the thermal camera and KW camera both still offline. Oh, excuse me. So here's our B1 camera. There's some venting as well. Here we have the remains of those September 2023 eruption vents right through there. More on that in a bit. The B2 camera. There's a new flow here in its foreground right through there from this most recent episode. K2 showing the degassing coming and joining the atmosphere here. And KP, can't see Kīlauea down in there. It's blowing like fog towards us. This is about the shape of the fog cloud on a camera here. That entire thing.
Yeah, I mean, the fog conditions have really been kind of the main thing that people are noticing, right? And it's so widespread, whereas the fallout with the Pele's hair, it's pretty confined to the Kīlauea volcano areas, depending on what the wind's doing. Whereas the fog, we're hearing reports on Maui, different areas, depending on the wind as well, but more widespread. And with all that emission sitting on that the new tephra on the back of the cone, it shows that the emission's still got a decent amount of gas in there. All right, back to you, Phil.
Yeah, thanks, Dane. Yeah, sorry, I got something caught in my throat here. So, okay, this is the V1 camera again, or V2 camera now, I should say. And this is a very first frame where you see that low level activity, just spatter still stuck in a cone back at around 6 p.m. on Monday night. So I'll play this here. You see that low level onset, the pistoning from north vent, oozing low level flows, and then the fountain start. A lot of material into the air and then feed these rivers of lava into the foreground here. And then kind of similar snaking path. And I'm going to pull that back here just to, maybe let's find a spot where it's nicely lit and pause it there. So there we go. Right. So you can actually see there was one arm of this channel that came around, hugging this northwest part of the caldera edge, right, against a cliff there. But otherwise, it splits into two branches. The one that goes in this regular direction, and then another one that snakes off here. And ultimately, this is going to feed towards this north edge of the crater, right under the field of view, right in here. And we're having to look at these cameras now to figure out what is the footprint of lava, since we don't have our KW or F1 thermal camera online right now at present. So we can see it's similar to before. Here is the V1 camera. So very first spatter to the pistoning, overflows, leading to the high fountaining. There it is. And you can see from this angle, you just mostly see there is that northwest branch and the main branch that heads east across the main center of the caldera. Late stage overturning event right there, and an extra glow and extra spatter coming in here at the end. visible in the view 1 camera. Pretty interesting to see all that. We'll keep it moving to the S2 camera before it goes offline. So here we are back on Monday still. You see gas degassing, glowing, low level. Then there's our lava fountain from the south vent. Once the fountain shuts off, the cone keeps moving, glowing, and you can see that's how it's possible for it to reshape itself and close off that opening, or at least remold it. As once the lava stops falling from the air, that pile is still moving under its own weight and fluidity. Let me do that one more time, since this is one of the best angles we have. Nice to compare the height of the fountain against the crater rim right there as well. More on that shortly. But one other thing to note here is when the view is in daytime, let's get us some daytime here. You can start to see how far up the wall we're starting to have deposits of tephra from all this fountaining events, right? Not quite up to the upper edge yet, but it's getting pretty close right there. I mean, it looks almost like you could, if you really wanted to try, scramble down in here and like scramble over there. If you really had to, you probably go tumbling all the way into a fiery death right down there, right? But look, there's actually is a pathway right there, right underneath where the fountain would be, where all this stuff's accumulating. So pretty fascinating to see that and think about it. The last report I've seen from USGS notes the vents being about 50 meters tall, 160 feet-ish or so. That's these lower level things right through here, not counting all this apron that's up against the wall. Right? If this was all flat land, all this stuff would be down, forming the back slope of this hill, but it's actually draped across the cliff here, it turns out, instead. Okay, we saw the National Park camera already, but I thought I would blow it up for you guys so you can have a better angle since we're missing our other cameras and get a different kind of view here of eruption. Dark second night entirely, but nicely glowing first night. There's that level of activity, fountains, or various rivers. You can see they come across good distance here. Here's the flow front. I come across a good distance across the crater floor on that path right there. All right, B2 camera, one of the ones that we use for a couple of different things. So to start off, here's our most recent episode. Low level activity, onset of fountaining, flow starts marching across a field of view. From what we're seeing before, where it was coming across this way, we see it now spreading out more towards the camera in the foreground. I'll play that one more time as well. Starts off near the vent. It's going to go across that, snake its way like that, and then spread its way over here eventually. And there it comes. Last glow and spatter here post fountaining. So one thing I like to do is take this camera especially. We see it's sensitive to injections of lava beneath the crust. This is episode 16 only. This is just since March 27th, just the last week or so since the end of the last episode. So you can see here at the very last frame here is the fountain shooting up. So what you might note is this whole central area is swelling upwards before the fountain actually shoots up here. So I have it rocking here so you can kind of see, or that's actually just looping so you can see it, right? And you can see the extent of this. It moves like it's moving the most right in here. That's where I see it wiggling up and down the most. But you see other effects farther over, like as far as somewhere in here. See that stuff moving all the way around. It's a pretty large area. You see it like all the way back here seems to be moving all the way to there. So really it's like a thin, compared to the depth of lava in this big pit now, right? It's a fairly thin crust on top, and somewhere underneath there, the magma that's coming up and pressurizing and causing low level activity is also somehow affecting what's underneath this crust, whether it's injecting itself directly, whether it's flushing out and it's going in and older magma is getting pushed out towards that other area. Not quite clear yet, but there are some interesting clues, like how can you have the north vent just bubbling or shut off when the south vent is fountaining so high? So there should be some interesting mechanics happening down there, and that's something to consider, as well as this injection of lava underneath the crust as well, right? So when later we see that ooze-up flows pop up over here to the right of this camera, it shouldn't be surprising because we see lava is actually injecting under the crust before it shoots a fountain out, in fact, right here. So that's pretty interesting note from the B2 camera. Let's pull it back now to the whole last 4 months. So here we are. This is back December 2nd, before our eruption begins. You can see our old crusted crater floor with all those old mineral deposits that we're used to looking at for many, many months unchanged. So there is the whole eruption with lava flows and injection both contributing to the overall gain in height of the crater floor, right? The decrease in the depth to the rim here as lava fills in the pit. So once in a while, it's cool to see these and just see how much it's changed in 4 months. And so I can sometimes like to zoom into some of these further back spots. And you can see these rocks for these steeper rock faces on the cliff, for example, right there, right? And note how far the crust ends up compared to before, or from there. So it ends back to down in there. So there's your distance of how much lava is filled in the crater. It's fascinating to see that. So just a reminder of that. And once again, still happening here. Just the most recent week. Still doing it a little bit here. So then here's our B1 camera. Our previous camera, the B2, was somewhere down in here looking this way. So now we can see that further wider view sequence. There is a level activity, the fountains, lava flows crossing the crater floor, and then oozing up all through here on the first night. And by the second night, those flows reach close to the margin of the flows there. And here in between are that September 2023 cones, what's left of them, quickly getting buried more and more as ooze-ups are occurring in this area. All right, so a couple other things to look at here. The K2 camera. So we showed you a little bit of this when we were talking about the gas emissions, but here's a low-level activity first, then the fountain coming in, and then all the VOG and tephra getting blown, and then the wind down effect of it from there. So let's see, this one begins here without any construction workers. The previous episode that I don't think I have us loaded up here, but if we look at episode 15, there's all the construction workers all rush to the edge to look at the fountain as it begins here. And then they all evacuate quickly after that, by the looks of what the camera shows. But today I wanted to show this one because this is interesting to me to note this question of how tall were the fountains, right? Because you look at some of these images and some of these frames, it's looking pretty tall there, right? We have the tree, right? There's one marker, the horizon there, so that's about the tree. But some of these, look at that, it's a good distance above the tree. How does this compare? People who went and saw the eruption say the fountains are really tall. It looks the same as it was the last time. It was probably 1,000 feet also. I don't know really exactly, right? So I was curious about this and try to tug at this a little bit more as well. So what I've done is take frames just like this one and put them on the right here for episode 16. And here is episode 15. This is the best frame I could get right now. Caveat is this is a camera. I'm getting one image every 10 minutes. So I'm pretty sure I'm not getting a very tallest peak of any fountain, but I'm trying to, see how lucky I get over the course of that whole eruption. And it's just all I have to go on right now, right? So starting off with this camera, the K2 camera. Let me just play this. And so I've just looped it here and just kept it static on the left as far as the tallest. Maybe it was up to here, that 1,000 feet. It's hard to tell exactly, but from this point of view, it's looking pretty close there. A lot of these fountains from this angle look about the same height as what we saw in episode 15. So maybe, right, and certainly understandable how visitors to the park could see this fountain and think, oh yeah, it's the same as it was before. It's not the same 1,000 feet. The trick is it's really hard to judge the heights, right, especially by eyeball like this. So I did this exercise as well for another camera, the S2 camera. And here it is. So I've got several frames on the left from episode 15, and this is several frames on the right from episode 16 as well. And so it's pretty similar overall, but maybe if I pause it and go through one at a time, here's a slight differences, right? Here's episode 15, and look at how the red is actually cut off by the top of the screen there, right? Whereas here, it's just a little bit below, so it's pretty tall. It's considerably higher than the cliff, but on this camera, which did not move in between, you can see a little bit shorter on that first frame there. Let's try another one. There's another one. See, there's some spray getting up there also, but you can see it's looking more robust here. Episode 15. So I'm tending to believe it might have been that slightly a little bit lower. Once it starts getting dark, you start getting some effects of the light, right? You see how we're lighting up the walls and the whole exposure is off. So yeah, maybe that's the top. It's still not quite to the edge of the screen. And once it gets darker, maybe we're getting to the edge of the screen, but is it really all lava, or is it some of it the exposure of the camera? And now it's getting hard to tell. Am I getting kind of similar there? We're all the way to the edge of the screen for sure. That one pretty close. So the USGS is saying that the highest fountains here might have been 800 feet, not 1,000. That might be all the difference you see right there between the two. And it's really, really hard to tell visually, especially when it's all moving without trying to take captures and comparing things side by side like we're trying to show you guys here, right? So yeah, interesting to note how that goes. So we do have some images from USGS also to inform this conversation. So to start, this is a release from yesterday, April 2nd, after the end of the episode. So some wider angle views of the summit and activity, or how the landscape looked following this most recent episode up there. This one is one I liked. Let's see if I can get this one a little bit more zoomed in, but here is closer to a vertical view of the vent system and the whole cone, because normally we're looking at the webcams from a fairly low angle. It's hard to see this really, really well, right? So there's the crater rim drive buried by tephra on the upper left. We see some of these southwest rift graben cracks all through here as well, getting filled into. And there is our cone. And so you can see the cracks surrounding it, or the area where it's still moving and slumping in. So like that's probably the edge of it right there, whereas everything above it here is that apron on the wall of the crater right there. And so this is the south vent and north vent off to the side. So I'm not quite sure if it's still at 50 meters tall from base to up here, but you'd imagine something like that, right? What else can we see here? Let's zoom it way in. There is still a tiny bit of the top of that June 2023 cone remaining, but it looks like it's almost all the way buried underneath there on the edge of the currently growing cone here. And so let's go back to our index image here. All right, so nice image from Kendraland. This one impressive as well. So if you've been to the park before this whole area was closed off, you might recognize this sign that used to stand next to the road. It used to be about that tall, right? 4 feet tall off the ground. And it used to be brown, right? And it's one of these park information signs that showed you these are the cracks and depressions that marked the beginning of the Southwest Rift. There was a little pull off on the road, and now this is just showing you how deep the tephra is in this entire area all across here. Right? This is not just one high spot. It's the same depth all across, and how we're really filling in much of the topography that was up there at the summit. So one more to look zoomed in at here. This is the vents are off in that direction. So this is the edge of the flow right here, coming through up here. And this big silvery pad is the ooze-ups that have occurred here on the eastern part of the caldera floor. So what's really interesting here is, let's zoom it in a whole bunch and find ourselves again. Let's see, where's some features. Yeah, there's an edge of some flow there. I gotta find my cones. There they are. So here we go. Here's the edge of one of these cones right there. Lava coming lapping onto it. The lava's coming up on a down drop block on the edge of it here as well. Another breakout from the ooze over there. Looks like there's some pits right there. Lava's filling into these pits. And here's one to look at more closely, right? See that edge of the old cone rim? You can see that all the stuff around it has grown, has filled in so much, and now lava is pouring into what was left of that little hole that was protected by that rim right there. It's cool to see that. 3 little drainages into this pit. It's probably filled in already. Other ooze ups around there. Let's keep panning. More of these cones. Look, there's another cone had a little barrier. Now lava's oozing into it too, and oozing up against the backside. So you can see why they say that it won't be long at this rate with these ooze ups that these features might get buried in this area, which is really amazing because at the time they seem to be 60 feet tall and standing so high above the rest of the down drop block. And we saw them grow in such a short time over that week, and taking a little longer, but all that stuff is getting to be base level now and getting buried in lava all around, reaching that same level. So we're really filling in the crater. And that's overall a big story of this eruption since December is now that we have this open vent system, we're really in this, it seems like, new phase of caldera filling, right? And so not clear to me yet without having volumes for every episode and the rates and all that, like, are we getting more increase in lava? And are we just having a more efficient system that can bring it to the surface better? Overall, as long as that lasts, you just keep putting sheet after sheet on the crater floor and filling in and recovering the collapse from 2018 and keeping the rift zones basically frozen at this point, right? Kind of and on pause without any activity, and everything feeding into the caldera, refilling the caldera for as long as possible, as long as this equilibrium lasts right here. Really fascinating time. And so those are those last 2 images. And they also were able to go down on a down drop block and see this flow approaching them there. And this one I like because it also tells you can see by the features. This is probably about 1 to 2 meters tall, 1 or 2 yards tall, this flow. So at this far edge, they're not super thick, but it's doing it one flow at a time over and over and over. And now we're at 16 times, right? So that adds up there. So that was the release from yesterday. There's one from the day before as well. We have the video, which we opened up with on our summary here. And there is that high fountain, low level activity from the north vent, or river of lava coming up and around. All the tephra in the air there, blowing into the desert over that way. Oh yeah, all that dark stuff is the Pele's hairs and Pele's tears and other bits of tephra that are falling back down and either coalescing and rejoining the flow or piling up to build up the cone or the debris apron here to the side. You can see all that right there. There's a difference. The top of the incandescent orange part is usually the top of the fountain. Everything above that is just the tephra that's getting carried by the wind because it's so low density, it might stay aloft for many miles potentially. But pretty fascinating to see that nice angle view there of that eruption. All right, so some different captures from there as well. And here you see some of those traces of the Southwest Rift where that sign was photographed somewhere in there. You also see all this really heavy stuff right up against the cliff falling back down. So you can see normally it would come more this way. During this episode, it was going a little bit more to the north. Similar view there again. Photos by Drew Downs. And because they're having this change in direction and variable wind conditions, here you see a slightly different approach from the USGS. Fountains prevented geologists from accessing the rim within the closed portion of the park. Instead, they hung back along the closed portion of the Crater Rim Drive to collect samples of tephra that were intermittently blown in their direction. So here's a geologist just watching a fountain, watching where the wind is dropping the stuff, and when it comes and drops something a little closer, then she may go and collect it when it's safe. Photo by Mike Zoller. The whole crew doing shifts all through there, right? This is a really massive era for the USGS staff to navigate this many episodes in such a short time. There's zoomed in fountain. And this one is interesting. You're looking through a rangefinder, and most interesting to me is actually the caption, right? So they're actually looking like there's a edge of the cliff. Where do you see red material to? Look, it's all the way up there. This might have been that one of those higher fountains there. So this is giving us some insight. Late in the evening of April 1st, HVO geologists watched the eruption from Kupina'i Pali Waldron Ledge. This view, captured through a laser rangefinder device, the geologists were using to measure lava fountain heights. So this is telling us they're trying to get a distant angle point of view. They're going all the way to Kupina'i Pali Waldron's Ledge and using the rangefinder from there to measure fountain heights. So that's an interesting thing to note there too, and maybe that's something we'll hear more about in the future too. There's all that tephra-laden gas cloud. When you're coming along the highway, this is from Highway 11, you actually could see the top of that fountain peeking over the horizon there as you're driving up the highway. There it is. There's a highway. There's the episode off the distance over there. Because the gas was blowing across the highway, they were able to do 6 traverses of driving under the gas plume to measure the gas emission rate, which is the way we used to do it. They used to drive on Critter Run Drive under the gas cloud in National Park and measure the blockage of UV from the sun, and that's how they can get emission rate of gas. So very rarely is the gas blowing over a conveniently placed road that you can do that with. But for one episode, it actually was. So they were able to go up and down 6 times, an average emission rate of 50,000 tons per day of sulfur dioxide during that high fountaining phase. So in line, that's what they've been saying for a while. So nice to see that confirmed. And then here further down, another photo by Katie Mulliken. There is a tephra in the middle of the road and along the shoulder that accumulated there. And it's a little bit hard to see there, but there it is, kind of gathered bits of tephra. You see a little bit of Pele's hair, maybe not the best unless I try to enlarge it here, but it's slightly out of focus too, depending where you look. But you can see some elements of Pele's hairs and bits of strung out spatter. Some Pele's hairs right down in there, for example. All through here too. So pretty wild to see it down on a highway. So there's our wide angle view. Finish things off. And then they get into some of the previous episodes. So previous episodes will join that time lapse to what we have over here. The release from March 27th, that was after episode 15. So photographs of that vent area before the sulfur is on there, right? So you kind of drape across the landscape. They note this tree was a healthy tree before all this tephra started falling all around it. Now you can see it's been struggling. You can see a little bit of the branches deflecting the stuff falling down here. So it's got a little bit of a gully that it's in right there. Yeah, partially buried and damaged by tephra produced by episode 15. Tree growing in a gully about 140 yards west of the rim. Go another picture of that highest fountain, episode 15, about 1,000 feet. Photo by Cheryl Ganseki, this time there. And those clots of lava in the fountain feeding the flow below. And more of episode 15 there as well. So let's play some of these videos. Episode 15, let's start off with a time lapse USGS has released here from the S2 camera, showing that low level activity to start. Lava flow is leaking out there, some glow, intermittent at the start. But once it leaves the vent, that's usually the beginning of the episode. There's a couple of data points that don't quite fit in there. But there is that time lapse. Low level from both vents to start in episode 15. And then we have the fountains coming on at both vents, shutting off at the north vent, continuing at the south vent, and decreasing, but lots of material. The highest fountains there off the screen. Then the fountain tips towards the camera, inclined, some kind of blockage in the vent there. Note there's like a little extra source right here on the side, shooting out right in line within the south vent, but like a second opening right there. Then it gets dark, heights decrease, things shut off. You see oozing flows and slumping in the vent area right there. So nice to see that. They have a little bit better resolution in their time and their frames than we do, so always cool when they put those out. And then continuing episode 15, this is one where I can get the sound in this one for you guys, unless I really hear this around. You really hear this fountain roaring. There is that high fountain, that highest fountain, shooting way red off the screen, even in this view, right? But I don't really look for the red that's falling, that's doing the words falling back down from there. Whereas anything above that, it just keeps going. It might just be glowing pumice and glowing tephra. Right? And maybe that's a bit easier than that as well. That force of gas, lots of gas driving lava into the air. These massive heights.
Phil, can you check your microphone? It just went really wonky. Like, get closer to it. Try that to start.
Yeah, let's see here.
That sounds better. It was just really wonky. You weren't talking that loud. You were looking away. I think like it just, yeah.
All right. Yeah, so really, really amazing video here. Lots of lava, shooting high in the air, cooling. The ones that fall down darker color, they're a little bit more solid, but still putty-like and fluid and rejoin this massive flow. There's some tropic birds flying down in there. Still,
actually, it still sounds like you're underwater and we can't hear what you're saying. Sorry.
Let me see here.
This just happened like a minute ago. And
let's see. That's fine. I mean, that's the obvious on my end. It's fine. Yeah, I'm just finishing up here with this view of this fountain. Really incredible footage. And you might, if you have the sound, if I could pipe it through, you'd hear the loud jetting sounds there as well. So that was 15. The USGS also released episode 14 video. See here, you still have the cameras on the edge. South vent only is going up to 14 north vent degassing. You can see not as much material is landing in a clear rim, but still quite a bit of impact on the edge there. Lots of gas bursts, lava plots. Pretty incredible to have USGS share these nicer coastal views with us here.
sorry, Phil, it is really, really hard to understand you right now. I don't know what's happening. Yeah, I mean, it's really rough.
I'm done. Seriously, I'm done.
Okay. All right. Well, we were at that point then. We didn't have that many questions. I tried to answer them a bunch in the chat. Just maybe speed run through these. I'll try and answer as best as I can. You can tell me if I'm wrong or not. Where is the vent lava depth now versus pre-2018? What was it? What was like? We're still below it, but not by all that much. What was it? 100 meters or something? Maybe less.
I'd have to look it up.
Yeah.
I have to look it up.
All right. And then wondering if you think the down drop block will refill at some point. I mean, seems like we're working on it.
Yeah, those most recent flows from the ooze-ups are coming on the down-drop block and covering more of it as well.
All right. And then also Miller asked, it seemed like the fountain wanted to come down, but the wind kept pulling it up, maybe on episode 15, getting a wind assist potentially.
Maybe, and even the thermals that it creates around itself as well, right? But you imagine most eruptions have similar thermals, and so yeah, maybe there was a little bit of extra wind, but yeah, I think mostly it's the jetting itself, right? Mostly the gas pressure within.
We'll do one last one from Chuck. Do you think the cones will grow up to the wall, the height or collapse under its own weight if the episode continues? One thing that's interesting to me is the lack of height on those cones. I don't know if most of the stuff is just being thrown too far, but 150 meters or 150 feet was it on those cones? They were saying.
Yeah, that's the most recent measurement we have reported, but that's from several weeks ago.
Okay.
To be fair, and it's not clear how much they're growing for the more recent episodes and a difference between one cone and the other. Also, we see that following each episode, the cones slump back down and in. So they're gaining height and losing height and gaining height and losing height. Right? But I think it's pretty interesting that you can compare this to like the Pu'o'o era, and what had a very similar growing cone under these fountains. They just had it on the flat with trade winds. It also had big flows that would flow in that area of the rift. Here, all of our flows are happening within the pit, but there's plenty of space to actually have a whole flow from the vent to where it stalls out at the other side of the crater. Actually, that's what we're seeing. Right, so pretty fascinating to see all that also. And yeah, I imagine that the cone likely will grow over time and evolve in shape and style as well.
All right. Well, I think that does it for questions. We did have a couple donations want to shout out. We had one from Mark Hardman for $50 plus the cost of processing, as well from Skyjet Ed. Came through on the website, hveri.org/donate. That is where we encourage donations. We do take super chats, but we end up taking more of the money to the nonprofit when you do use the site. And just in case you want to see that, this is the web address for that. But yeah, we appreciate all the donations, all the support, like subscriptions, everybody that showed up today. And we will be back next Thursday unless something unexpected happened. An episode happening is not unexpected at this point. It kind of is the expectation. We'll see when that ends up happening. But if something, like big earthquake happens, then we'll be live. Or a rift zone eruption, then, but not really expected in the next week. But in case. Otherwise, next Thursday, 5 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time, we will be back.
Yeah, the biggest question now is, will we get the episode before next Thursday or not? Or will it take a little longer? Right? That's probably our biggest mystery now. It seems like everything else is back on track.
We might have to do a picture-in-picture next episode. Be like, oh, is it doing the thing? Is it doing the thing? Is it starting?
So yeah, mahalo everyone. Mahalo to our ASL interpreters. We're a little bit over our time here today, and they're still going strong. Appreciate you guys. And yeah, we got Lou Atori on the back end, Daniel and Carrie, Dane DuPont, and I'm Philip Ong from our nonprofit HVERI, the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute. Until next week. Aloha, everybody.